Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Black Op Radio. This is your host, Len Osanic, and we are talking to Barry Krusch, a longtime JFK researcher, and he has something new, the JFK Shell Game Challenge. Hello, Barry.
Hey there, Len. How you doing?
Good. I'm very interested in what you have here, something new on the web, and I thought I'd give you a chance to promote it and let people know what it's all about. So I'll give you the floor.
Well, thanks. Well, you know that Hulu is going to be having a series called 11/22/63 based on the Stephen King book, and that's going to start on President's Day in February. So I figured, well, since the Kennedy assassination is once again going to be in the news, why not provide something for people to send links to and pass around to their friends, share on Facebook, put on Twitter, and to highlight really one of the key points in the case, which is that the central premise of that show, that Oswald was the assassin of President Kennedy, is not justified by the evidence. And most people actually haven't seen the evidence. They've, heard versions of the evidence. They've read summaries of the evidence. Most people, I would say, haven't even looked at the evidence. So their belief that Oswald did it is really based on more of a hall of mirrors effect, right? Like, if Wikipedia says it and Hulu says it and my high school textbook says it, it must be true. But the fact is that each one of those entities is looking at the other entity and not at the evidence. And when you look at the evidence, you see a very different story. And that's what this is designed to prove.
What was the catalyst for this idea of a shell game?
Really, the central problem with the whole notion that Oswald was guilty is that the evidence is reliable. And people believe that there is evidence, reliable evidence, against Oswald, but evidence has to pass a series of tests in criminal law. You can't just say anything you want or put anything out there you want. There's certain tests that have to be performed on the evidence to make sure it's legitimate evidence. One of those tests is chain of custody. So that if someone says that they found an empty bullet shell on the floor of the Texas School Book Depository, we ought to be able to trace the passage of that shell from detective to detective and ultimately, to the FBI lab.
Yeah,
And then
chain of
back,
custody.
right, chain of custody. And there's rules for this. So in fact, the Warren Commission brought some people before it and said, is this your mark on the shell? Yes, it is. And did you make it at this time? Yes, I did. And who'd you give it to? I gave it to this guy. And then he says, well, yes, that's my mark on the shell. And there's also a trail of paper, too, accompanying that testimony. Well, the point is that there isn't a chain of custody sequence that's legitimate for these shells that were found on the floor of the depository, supposedly found on the floor of the depository. And that's the point of this JFK shell game challenge. If someone thinks that they have a chain of custody sequence that, would pass muster, let them try and put this thing together. And if they can, I'll give them $5,000.
Oh yeah. Now with a typical shell game is an obfuscation, right? You're talking about we're gonna hide the real evidence and we're gonna misplace it and not label it right, and so you'll put it under the shells, right? Here you're talking about the shells of the rifle, so it's a little double gotcha.
Well, what's interesting is that, shell game is actually almost a literal, it's not metaphorical here. It was really a literal shell game where they're, passing all these different shells around. And some, were fired from Oswald's rifle, and some may not have been fired from the rifle, and some weren't necessarily fired from the rifle on November 22nd, 1963. And when you look at this whole thing, it's a complete mess. No one can win this thing. That's the point of it. So I put this thing together, and so far 100 people have accessed the site, and no one yet has attempted to win.
Right. Well, hopefully we'll get a lot more people to look at the site and see if they can what they can do. I mean, if somebody can win, even more power to them. So let's go through a few of the players here. Brown, Williams, Sims. Do you want to describe a little bit some of the problems facing people trying to solve this?
Right. Well, so the first thing is you've got the rectangles here indicating the players in this chain of custody sequence. And so you've got other rectangles at the top, and you're supposed to drag the top names into the bottom. So Day is, Carl Day, detective of the Dallas Police Department, who handled most of the evidence and who is a really fishy character, to pay him a compliment. I devote an entire chapter to his testimony in my book, Impossible, the Case Against Lee Harvey Oswald, which, by the way, is free now. And it's on this webpage. So they can read the book, and they can also read this chapter 9. Now, Day's testimony is crazy. And in fact, he's really basically implicating himself in the framing of Oswald if you read it closely enough, because it's so bizarre and so contradictory and so internally contradictory, not to mention externally contradictory. That is to say, it actually contradicts other evidence that's out there. But Day claims that he was the first guy to have the shells, and then it was passed to either Sims or Brown, depending on which version of the evidence you're looking at. And then at that point, it could either go from Sims to Doty or from Brown to Williams, possibly, although we really don't know that for sure. And if it does go to Sims, does it go back to Day, or does it just go back to Doty? And then Fritz somehow gets involved in this, and he gets a shell, supposedly, except that wasn't recorded either. And so, any one of these names that were put here is not going to give you a happy path, the real chain of custody sequence you're supposed to get. What's more significant is that this single issue here, and the reason why I turned this into the Shell Game Challenge, the reason why I'm focusing on this is because there's so much chaos and so much confusion out there. There's hundreds of books, and there's all these theories and hypotheses, and it's really bewildering to the average person. So I wanted to find what one single issue that you could show people that would, A, not only exonerate Oswald, but B, show that someone tried to frame him in very clear, convincing evidence that cannot be disputed because it's the official evidence, it's part of the official record. No one can dispute this. And no one can dispute the interpretation of it, because if they think they can, they would win this challenge. And the interpretation of it is that some very hanky-panky was played that day. Hanky-panky. Shenanigans.
Yeah.
Treasonous
I know what
shenanigans.
you must have been thinking, because a little while ago, me and Jeff Carter made a series called 50 Reasons for 50 Years.
Mm-hmm.
And we tried to, it was the 50th anniversary, we tried to think, well, what's one thing? Like, what can we do to illuminate this Lee Oswald as being set up as a patsy? And and so you start going through the rifle or the gunfire or just, well, we came up with 50 reasons. But
right.
they were meant to be the tip of the iceberg. They weren't as explanatory as your shell game is. It's saying, okay, here's what they said happened. Recreate it.
Exactly.
You're going to reveal the impossibility of it, and then you hope people come away with that saying, well, if this is really a fraud, what else are they lying about? And you could go into, I've got another 49, right? That's
the thing. I mean, you say tip of the iceberg, which is exactly what it is. People don't realize just how bad this case is. So I'll give you some other things that are linked to. So this shell game challenge is not the only thing that's really this is about. There's other stuff on here. So I've got of course, there's the book, and there's audio recordings from Amy DeLong of the National Archives about these photographs that reveal exactly what's going on. But when I put these photographs up on the web, there was a guy who really examined the shells closely, and this is some new evidence that was discovered just last year. He found Oswald's thumbprint on one of the shells, and he has an entire video on there that proves it's Oswald's thumbprint. And he thought that this was going to demonstrate that, yeah, Oswald really was a guilty party. He handled one of these shells. The problem is that this video backfires on him. And the reason is that the detectives did not find any fingerprints or thumbprints on those shells originally. And there's multiple people that testified to that. So if Oswald's thumbprint is on the shell, it wasn't there when those shells were confiscated. It had to have been put there afterwards, and he obviously wasn't handling them afterwards, right? They were in the possession of the Dallas Police Department and the
Yeah,
FBI.
yeah. Oh, just another example of the fix is in.
Well, there you go. If that is Oz, and this is again something that can be tested. You can get that fingerprint. You can see it. The guy, you can see the video on this webpage. You can see him comparing Oswald's thumbprint to what's on the shell. And if he's correct, that's conclusive proof that someone tried to frame the guy. Just that alone, not to mention all the other stuff. Another new piece of evidence that was discovered in the last year was that one of the parties to this, J. Doyle Williams, his marks are on the shell, but on the other hand, his marks should not be on the shell, according to Day's testimony. So one of the things that I discovered in the line during the course of my research is that there's two lines of shells in play on that day, based on the evidence. 3 shells, which are passed to Detective Sims, and 2 shells, which are passed to Brown of the FBI. 2 separate handoffs. But we know there's only 3 shells total that could have been handed off, which means that there was another 2 that were introduced into the evidence and then later disappeared.
Yeah, let me ask you about how many shells were found at the scene.
Well, that's an interesting question. All the documentary evidence points to 2, but they say there's photographs that there are 3. So right there at the very beginning of the case, you've got this whole 3 versus 2 dichotomy. And
yeah, there's just something strange about the photographic evidence. It's almost as if that third shell has been imposed on the would you agree with that at all?
Well, I think so. I mean, I've seen one of those photographs and it does look a little doctored, but on the other hand, these photographs themselves aren't necessarily legit, because many of these photographs were actually reconstructions that were not taken on November 22nd, but were taken on November 25th, and you can find that in the Warren Commission testimony. So therefore, if you have a photograph that has 3 shells in it, it doesn't mean it was taken on November 22nd.
Yeah,
Right?
wow. So people aren't even sure of how many shells were found that day.
No.
Well, what was the catalyst for you to make this on the web? Is it just that you want to draw attention to people who are new to the case, or is it more like rubbing? I mean, have you come up against lone Warren Commission supporters who claim that
Ah,
the evidence is there, so here's one way just to rub it in their face?
well, it's a combination of both of those with a little variation. So first case, the question is, how do you make this Kennedy assassination relevant for the younger people out there? Of course, for me, I was alive when Kennedy was assassinated. It's very relevant to me, but to someone who's 18, maybe it's not as relevant. A lot of people look on this as history, sort of like John Wilkes Booth. It's just some history book thing. But the reality is, it's not just a history book thing. The reality is, if Oswald wasn't guilty and would have been found not guilty in a court of law, then this would still be an open murder case, which would call for an investigation. It's a live murder case. It's not history. That's the first point. And you want to try to bring people in on this as best you can. Of course, you write books, which I've done, or you can do videos, which I've done, and now I've got an interactive web-based training exercise, which is the third medium. And so this is another medium just for people to sort of experiment, but this is much more interactive, right? Because if people, it's one thing to actually conceive of the problems, but it's another to try and drag the sequence correct. And then you realize that you just don't have the information to even begin, so then you have to actually look at the evidence. And when you look at the evidence, you realize, well, there's no way this can be won. And so, therefore, it is a retaliation to people that would support the Warren Commission, because there's really nothing there to support. What was left is not worth supporting or even can be supported. So, the people have come to me, they've criticized this whole concept of the shell game, or they say that, "Oh yeah, we've got a chain of custody. We know what's going on." And so I said, "Well, okay, prove it." And the thing is, they never do. They always run away.
Well, it's very well done. It reminded me of some other thing that was on the web where it was somebody, I don't know if it was in Scotland, wherever, but they had links to McAdams. So as soon as I see John McAdams attached to a something, you get this sick feeling in your stomach of a colossal fraud. And it was to recreate the shooting. So you get up in the sixth floor and you've got three shots and you try to recreate it, and the winner would get $10,000 or something, right?
Yeah,
And
right.
it was pathetic.
Yeah.
And several people had mentioned that the best way to do it when the car just makes its initial turn, you just shoot the driver of the limousine when you're looking straight down on them. The car stops right there, and you just pick everybody off like shooting fish in a barrel kind of thing, right?
Well, yeah,
And
the thing is any hypothesis about the shooting has to, take into account the forensic evidence of the case. And again, I really cover that extensively in the book. And the angles that of entry into Kennedy's body are all over the place, just likewise with Connolly. It's an epistemological train wreck, right? So you can literally find lots and lots of different angles. What's really interesting is that, number one, so that automatically shows that the evidentiary base is highly suspect. But more important, there's no combination of those angles that's going to result in one bullet passing through another person. I mean, it just can't happen from a trigonomic perspective. Mathematically can't be done.
something else at your website here on right after the menu is the Wikipedia Rehabilitation Project. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Right. Okay. So, if you click on that link, you go to the Wikipedia article on Oswald, and, he's guilty. He's the assassin. But if you
Oh
notice
yeah, they
on that
call him a
article,
sniper, right?
yeah,
American sniper. Are you kidding me?
right. But you'll notice if you want to try and edit that article and correct their mistakes, it's locked. So someone is managing this article to prohibit people from putting the evidence that exonerates Oswald into that article.
Yeah, there's a couple of people, and really, you cannot trust Wikipedia. Wikipedia is just known for being, well, I wish I could really tell you what I really thought of them in harsh words, but I'll just say liars. The idea that the truth is not relevant. I mean, it's what their editors want to say it is.
Correct.
And there are so many examples of people trying to correct things about themselves when they say you're not a contributor and you have to pass on. I mean, I make reference many times. I'll do it again right now to a TED talk about AstroTurf when they talk
Mhm.
about how you have these grassroots or organizations and efforts, and their grassroots meaning from the people up, and but AstroTurf is what Wikipedia has become: phony, plastic. You can pay to get your point of view on there. If you're a pharmaceutical company and you want to say your product is safe, and all these other guys who say it's cancer causing, they're crackpots. That seems to be the catchphrase here. If they call somebody a crackpot, you almost can tell, yeah, there's something going on here with these Wikipedia editors. And I'll talk to you about this after the fact, but
Oh,
uh,
it's definitely it's a big issue because when Wikipedia first started, it really was, a very interesting place, and you could post anything, and it really was sort of like the encyclopedia of the people. But in the last, I would say 5 years, it's completely become something else. And, for certain key articles, like
bought and
anything,
paid for, yeah.
yeah, 9/11, any hot political issue, it's pretty much, stay away from the thing because it's not going to be legit. It's going to be missing some very key evidence. And, like my book was in the bibliography at one time and it suddenly disappeared. And, over the course of the history of this thing, the only books that you would find listed in the bibliography were the pro lone nut hypothesis, right? Pro Warren Commission point of view for the longest time, and now I think they've eliminated it entirely. Last time I checked. So if the evidence that you see here on this shell game challenge, that's not in that Wikipedia article. And I've got
Sorry,
1,000 pages in my book, and I would say 999 of those pages aren't in the Wikipedia article.
Yeah,
So
Wikipedia is almost. I hate to say it. I don't go to it very often. If there's any other choice, I don't go to it, and it it's almost synonymous with fraud. You know.
yeah.
So I started Proutypedia, and
Oh, what's
if you
that?
Proutypedia.
Really?
Yeah, I
Wow.
had such a problem with they made up a Fletcher Prouty entry on Wikipedia, and I was trying to change it to honestly just correct them and say here's the facts about Fletcher Prouty. I worked with him. I run his website, and he answers letters on his website while he was alive, and he would post a monthly commentary while he was alive. And I mentioned, in the acknowledgments of the forwards of his book, The Secret Team, when it was reprinted. So there was several things that put me as someone who's working with Fletcher Prouty,
Hmm.
and they said that I was only running a fan site, and you're not allowed to, you can't put Prouty.org, Colonel Prouty reference site, on Wikipedia. It's been blacklisted. It's been banned.
Is that right?
Yeah, yeah, total ban. I through a couple other moderators, I made the appeal to say, well, listen, can't I just mention the page? If you don't like some of the articles, fine, I won't link to them. You have to link to them. You can say for further information, go to Colonel Prouty's own site, Prouty.org.
Well, absolutely.
Yeah, no, they don't allow that either.
So now the supposed watchword of this thing is neutral point of view, right?
Oh, they're
Yep.
anything but neutral. There's some people have written. I forget the name of the article, but anatomy of an online atrocity. I think where they've captured, and which Wikipedia's taken down now. But the arguing going on by some of these Robert Fernandez, Gamamiel, whatever his name is on Wikipedia, making these pathetic arguments, saying why anything to do with Fletcher Prouty should not be on there. Saying, well, because Prouty.org is a fan site where you can just buy T-shirts from, it shouldn't be allowed as anything. And said, listen, Glenn worked with Fletcher Prouty, and it's Fletcher Prouty's website. What he doesn't sell any T-shirts there. What are you talking about? And they grasp at straws. Their thing is they don't want this alternate point of view. They don't want people to know about that Lee Oswald was not the assassin. The same thing with Saran, James Earl Ray. They have a real agenda here, and the
Absolutely.
and the agenda is what's
Yeah.
troubling, not whatever you think about Fletcher or Lee Oswald or something. People can discuss and debate, and like we're talking about earlier, do we know if there was 2 shells found or 3 shells? Well, that could be another place where you could say it may be in dispute where what researchers how many shells were found. Okay, we could leave it at that. I don't mind, but anyway, yeah, Prouty, anything Fletcher Prouty was banned, and the links were to anything from Fletcher's real site, not this, you know, uh, McAdams type organized fraud. So,
That's interesting. Well, any article on Prouty must link to his own website, I would think, just,
oh, I
mm,
don't even want you to go through it, but if you
anyone.
read this article, I'll send it to you. Your jaw will drop by the end of it, and you'll go, "Who are these guys? Are they for real?" Are
Well, Wikipedia is very easy to game, right? So you could hire some people and just get them to be professional collaborators, and all of a sudden they can hijack an
Oh
article.
yeah. Yeah, yep, that's what they do. And this article on the TED Talk was about AstroTurf, and it just revealed the fraud they have there. So I urge anyone, do not donate money to Wikipedia, you know.
Absolutely not.
And
No.
I would I'll after the interview's over, I'll just discuss this with you. But if you want to add anything to Proutypedia, like for instance, a page on Lee Oswald, I have someone working on a page on Oliver Stone because of the fraudulent things they say about his movie, things that are just not true. I
Hmm.
mean, I'm looking at this on your page here, and then they just say the House Select Committee's acoustical evidence has since been discredited. Right? Yeah, by who? By John McAdams?
Yeah. Well, there is very strong, solid, indisputable evidence of A, conspiracy, and B, a conspiracy to frame Oswald, which no one can challenge. And this is one example right here.
Well, I don't know anyone. I don't know anyone who has done any research on the JFK assassination, pro or con, who ever called Lee Oswald a sniper. Okay, and that's what they have here, American sniper. Are you kidding me?
Mm-hmm.
So the first sentence there, you can kind of say, "Oh, yeah, right. Here's a real slant on this article."
Right. And then they say, according to 5 government investigations. Well, again, that's one of the things, the boomerangs, right? According to 5 government investigations, he was the assassin. Well, but if he wasn't the assassin, and if 5 government investigations said he was, then what does that mean? You know, it really shows that the fix is in at a very high level, because these investigations took place over a period of years, and from 1963 to what, 1977, I think it was. So over a period of 14 years, and you have other investigations which go in a different direction, like the 1992 Assassination Review. And if you had 5 that said that it was Oswald, when this type of analysis that I'm doing proves it's not, then what does that prove about the investigators?
Yeah.
How
Yeah,
good can
the
they
things
be?
and this criticism is cherry picked, and then the other side of the coin is that I think people are surprised to find out that some of these commissions were infiltrated with people who had a real agenda. When you get a George Joanides coming out of retirement to help, he's given a medal for his work. I mean,
Hmm.
it's unbelievable.
Well, and again, so when you dig deeper, you look at these investigations, you go, well, who benefits, right? And the same thing could be true of the 9/11 investigation. Is the fox guarding the hen house is the question that people have to ask themselves. And you really need independent investigations that look at the science of it and the forensics of it and reach indisputable conclusions versus, speculation, right? And what's indisputable in this case here is that you cannot convict Oswald just on this one issue alone. And this is the only one you need. You don't have to read any other books or anything else. You just look at this one issue. You go, well, they cannot prove that those shells on the depository floor, if they were there, are the ones in the archives. And more importantly, it looks like some were planted anyway. And now we're talking about trying to frame someone for murder.
Yeah,
And that's another
fraud.
fraud. And that's a whole nother thing, right? But no matter how you look at it, Oswald's not guilty. And that's indisputable. And on my other challenge, I have another challenge, the $100,000 one, which I was on your show, I think a couple years ago to talk about, or 3 years ago. And
Gee, I
no
don't
one's.
recall it being that much money. I thought it was a $10,000 thing. It's $100,000 challenge.
Oh, well, I think it started at 5,000.
Yeah.
Maybe when I was on your show, it was 10. Then I boosted it to 25,000, and then I boosted it to 100,000, and no one
Okay,
has.
okay. So you got my attention here. Give listeners a good description of this, right? You might attract some attention now.
Okay, so, I wrote this book, Impossible, The Case Against Lee Harvey Oswald, and this book was really designed to be used in an arbitration hearing so that it would really be the focus of an arbitration hearing. And I make claims in the book, and the only way people can dispute my claims is saying, A, I falsified some evidence, or B, I didn't include some material evidence, right? I mean, those are the 2 ways they could do it. And I said, if you can prove I've done either or both of these things to the extent that it affects my conclusion, I'll give you $100,000. And no one has even tried. So then what I did is I came up with a mini challenge. Because to win the first one, you had to win before 12 arbitrators, just like a jury, right? Jury of 12. And I said, all right, I'll make it even easier for you. I said, do one arbitrator and pick just one of the issues in my book, like this shell game thing. Just pick one issue with one arbitrator, and if you win, you'll get 2% of the $100,000, $2,000. No one's tried that either. So, and no one's going to do this either. I mean,
Well, I'm going to make a link to your website, krusch.com/JFK. I'll let people know about that. That's the thing, and
I have 88,000 people have watched my video on these shells, and I've talked about this $100,000 challenge. No one even tries. No one even disputes anything. Do you understand what I'm saying?
oh, I know because
When you put the money into it, that shuts everyone up, and that's why I did it. It's one thing to come up to me and talk to me about I'm a liar, I did this, I did that, I'm a nut, or whatever. I say, okay, well, if you believe that, I'll just give you $100,000 if you can prove it. And that's what shuts them up, because they know that if they start talking like that, I'm just going to come back at them with this challenge, and they're not going to win it, so they just go away. So no one challenges me. No one argues with me. I'm not one of these guys that would be the subject of a McAdams book or a Bugliosi book. They stay away from me. They don't talk about me because they know that they have nothing and that I actually have done what I said I would prove, which is that Oswald would have been found not guilty. I've proved it. So
Well, it's very interesting, and some people say put your money where your mouth is, and you've certainly done that.
I have, although I have to say I'm not really risking anything at the end of the day because I know it's a slam dunk. I know there's no way they can win, and they know it too. So while it might look like I'm risking some money, I'm not really. It's just a way of proving that, you know, there is no risk here. There's no argument here. The evidence says exactly what I say it says, and no one will ever challenge me on it. And therefore, let's stop talking about Oswald. Let's stop having shows like 11/22/63, which are pointing the fingers at Oswald. Let's stop having Wikipedia articles that say it's Oswald. Let's stop having history books that say it's Oswald. And let's try and figure out who it really was.
Yeah, we had David Talbot on Black Op Radio discussing Alan Dulles, and I think you're
Now we're
talking
getting
about
now you're getting
yeah,
closer.
yeah, yeah. Ed Lansdale, Alan Dulles, fringe elements of people working for that. Sullivan, Cromwell, Alan Dulles, Department of Defense, CIA. Doesn't have to be everybody in the CIA building, but it happens
And,
to be.
it wouldn't be either.
Yeah, yeah.
And you can't say it's the CIA. It's not the CIA. It would be individuals there and
People fired by Kennedy,
Mhm.
formerly of the CIA.
Right, who have connections with the CIA and who have internal workings and who know
Yeah.
how to do this stuff.
Whose brother was the mayor of Dallas at the time.
Could be, and also Lyndon Johnson possibly or J. Edgar Hoover. I
I
mean, it's
remember I asked Fletcher Prouty about this. I said, "How do these people come together that might not normally be together?" And he said, "It's like smoke in a campfire or something like that. You see it rise up and it all joins, but another day it's different. It's different." So these people, were you talking about Cubans and organized crime and LBJ and Lansdale and Alan Dulles and these people who might not normally get together on something on this one issue, they all agreed.
right because and they were previously connected. Let's not forget that. So the CIA and the mafia were previously connected. So there might have been some mafia involvement in somewhere, somehow. Like, for example, one of the shooters, maybe, or maybe not. I don't know. But the point is that there were all these connections there. And so it's not necessarily outlandish to say, well, that some groups could be military, could be some doctors, could be guys in the Dallas Police Department, could be some guys in the Secret Service, could have been part of some other network and were, working together in that network for other purposes and then got together for this purpose.
Yeah, I wouldn't surprise me that if there was people that were there to be blamed, like if Oswald didn't make it to work that day or something else, that they might have had um, organized crime figures told to show up or be in Dealey Plaza or something. So if something goes wrong with cover story A, they fall back on B or C. And if
Absolutely.
this wasn't the first time you did this, I mean, if you did this in other countries, like somebody like Lansdale did, then it would be second nature. They would know things go wrong. They have to have a plan B, a plan C.
No
So
question about it.
yeah, yeah,
And that's why you have this 2 and 3 thing, because the 2 versus 3 shells. Because remember, when Oswald was captured, he was not killed immediately like I believe he was supposed to be. All right. He was alive. Well, with Oswald alive, all of a sudden they've got real problems. So I think that they had another story there. Another 2 shells that were not fired from his rifle to implicate someone else because they couldn't implicate him if he's still alive, right? And that's the 2 shells that went into the original stream of evidence. But they had another 3 shells there just in case he was killed for the second line, right? So they could go both ways. Either he's killed or he's not killed. And now they've got 2 separate pieces of evidence that they can either hide or not hide. And of course, once he was killed on the Sunday afterwards, then they could go to the story they wanted to tell, which is it was really just was Oswald. Now they had to bury all that other evidence because a lot of this evidence in the Shell Game Challenge was not even revealed until 1992. So
You
no
know,
one
when
knew about this
I'm
stuff.
looking at this right now, your shell game, and I'm just thinking you almost could do an identical one for this maybe next year about getting Oswald to the theater, to the Texas theater. Get him from the sixth floor. Is he in a cab or is he in a bus or does he is he in the Rambler? You know, how does he get home and what shirt is he wearing? And then how does he run? I mean, it's
Oh,
this shell
absolutely.
game is great.
Oh, yeah. And what's interesting is you find that metaphor in other places, as you've just mentioned. The Rambler versus the bus, right? The double Oswald thing, the imposter Oswald. And there's a lot of evidence of this. I mean, there's a whole book devoted to it. Harvey and Lee, right?
Right. Well, you know, the thing that gives it, I think, some importance is I forget the guy's name right now, but I think he ended up being the mayor of Dallas,
Oh, yeah.
and
Uh-huh.
he he got a report of a guy who witnessed this Oswald lookalike sitting in a car at the gas station across there, and the guy took the license plate number down of this car, and he said, "I don't know who they're arresting in the theater there because I've seen this guy here who was on TV sitting in this car waiting for an hour, and I was so suspicious I took the license plate number down." Do you recall that incident? And he ended up reporting that to whoever ended up being the mayor of Dallas a couple of years later. But geez, I wish I could remember more of this story right now, right in front of me. But it's another thing where you talk about these doubles or lookalikes and
Mm-hmm.
different scenarios where
How about the Mauser versus Carcano?
oh, I know. I mean, these guys knew weapons, okay?
Mm-hmm.
I remember Jeff Morley asked me to comment about that. He goes, "I want you to, answer Gary Mack on something here." And I said, "Listen, I'm not going to start an argument with him." He goes, "I'll write down whatever you say on my website." I said, "I don't care." The guy filled out an affidavit. He knew weapons. He said it was a Mauser. They
Yeah,
found a Mauser. That's what he signed his name to. So if Gary Mack says he doesn't believe it, I don't care about Gary Mack. That guy's a gutless liar.
yeah. And, and so there you go. And there's another example. Now, what's interesting is that this doubling of evidence you see over and over and over again in this case. Um, and that's what tells you that there's maybe something going on behind the scenes. Can this really be a coincidence? You know? Not to mention, of course, the fact that boxes are moving in the window. That was one of the things in my book. You know, the photographs that show the boxes are being moved in the window when Oswald is gone, but before any cops have arrived.
Yeah, yeah. There's people are making some good little animated gifs now of little snippets of films where you can kind of focus in on something, and I've seen quite a few of those pop up where they just make a 3 to 5 second little clip of something, and you look and then you go, "Now I recognize, I see something going on there," right? Which
So, and the question is like, so with all the evidence that's out there that you and I have seen, of course, have the whole thing about, the autopsy, the body bag versus the casket, and all that stuff. There's so much of this stuff. When are people going to do what they're supposed to do and have a new investigation, a private one that really focuses on the death of an American president?
well, it's starting with people like you doing good research, like Black Op Radio, or trying to be catalysts to get more people to wake up to see what's going on. So when you mentioned earlier, when something like 9/11 happens, and people are pointed out, look at how Building 7 falls. What are you talking about? And they go, well, I don't know. I guess they looked into it. No, they didn't. And there it is right in front of you. So it's if you don't take the time to look into it for yourself, it'll just be another mystery.
And the other thing is this. So it's a mystery that if you don't solve is going to lead to other problems down the line. So because they didn't do the Kennedy assassination correctly, the people followed up correctly with a real investigation. I think that the people that pulled 9/11 off, it sort of inspired them a little bit to think, well, maybe we can get away with this thing. And so they did. And they did get away with it. That's two that they got away with. Now,
No, Bobby Kennedy, right?
whoever, there could be a ton of things that we don't even know about, right? I mean, there's a lot of this stuff that we just don't even know.
And I think that when you run across this complete fraud of Wikipedia, it starts to rub it in your face. You're going, this isn't any kind of level history. And what are they afraid of? They're obviously afraid of something. They're not afraid of a lone 24-year-old, ex-Marine or whatever.
Yeah, they're afraid of the Americans finding out the truth, and that's why they have to lock the article so that the evidence can't be populated there. So let me give them the URL to this thing. It's krusch.com/JFK shell/story.html. And will that be linked to on your?
Oh, we make very good show notes, as
Okay.
you may know on our interviews, so
Yeah.
people can listen to the show and then click on the link and that. Yeah, I'll make all sorts of links for that. You got a lot here, and of course your other. Where's your other impossible? The
Oh,
case.
so when they go to this thing, there is an evidence link at the top. And if they click on that, the book, which sells on Amazon, they can actually download for free. And that's something I did in the last couple months. Was I created an edition of this book, which is exactly the same book with actually it's a little better because I fixed a lot of errors, and it's in PDF form. So if anyone has an iPad or a Kindle, they can bring this PDF onto their Kindle or iPad, and they can read it when they're on a plane or whatever. And it's actually awesome on an iPad. A 10-inch iPad, it reads beautifully. You can see the color image is great, and you can search for terms, and you can, of course, bookmark and highlight and all that stuff. Of course, in my book, one of the things that differentiates it from a lot of the books is that there's a ton of screen captures in there. So, you'll have some books on Kennedy which will just have words and analysis. Then you'll have some books which are just photographs. But this book really is very few that really combine the analysis and the photographs and the screen captures one right after the other. So when I talk about evidence in the case, I don't just summarize it, I actually show it to the reader. I have a screen capture of it. It's right there in front of them. And they can see that I'm not manipulating anything. Or, I had to do this for the arbitration hearing, right? Sort of like Exhibit A, Exhibit B, that type of thing. So it would be right in front of the arbitrator's face. You could look right at it and not have to hunt it up. And so that everything's legit. And it's basically, people who have read the book have told me, well, gosh, I never knew all this stuff. I mean, why does anyone think Oswald is even a suspect? You know, why are we even talking about him? And the fact that we're talking about him, and probably will be talking about him for the next 50 years, is an indication that something is radically wrong somewhere with the media and with the schools and how people get information. And things like Wikipedia. I mean, how many people read my book? Let's say 88,000 people saw my video. How many look at that Wikipedia article? Probably millions, right? So you're fighting this mass culture, which is created really by very few people have control over this article and have conveyed their point of view simply by owning that article and spreading false information.
Now, you mentioned your book is available for free.
Mm-hmm.
The case against Lee Harvey Oswald. Where is that available?
So if you are you looking at the Shell Game Challenge? Okay, so if you go to the Shell Game Challenge link, and on that there is an evidence link at the top of it, and if you click that evidence link, you'll see PDFs, and one of them is Chapter 9 of my book, which downloads very fast, and then the other is the entire book, all 1,000 pages of it.
Okay, Barry, well, thanks so much for taking time to discuss this. I'm very interested in anything you do. I want to know if there's anything that I didn't get to, I didn't bring up yet, that you would like to also discuss.
No, I think we've pretty much covered it, but I'll make a special offer for anyone who listens to this. If you think you can win the challenge, I'll give you an extra $5,000 if you mention Len's show.
Boom! Boom goes the dynamite. Oh, you gotta love that.
Boom!
And you split that with me, whoever wins.
And I'll split it with Len.
Barry,
good luck.
it's been very interesting and delight to speak to you. Thanks for your good work. Keep it up.
No
And this is just another example, not to be vindictive or anything, but to rub it into other people. Say, yeah, the evidence is there. Lee Oswald did it, and you say, okay, show me the money. Here, I'll give you $5,000 if you can solve this shell game. You get
Yeah.
them.
Exactly. So if you ever talk to anyone on Facebook or any of these forums and you find one of these people, just give them this link, and don't be surprised when they don't respond to you or they make up some baloney story. But the last thing they'll do is try and solve this thing.
Yeah. And I've noticed with all of them, not many of them, all. They go in and change the topic. They try to change it. Oh, well, what about this? Well, what about that? No, stay on point.
Right.
Here it is right here.
Right.
Play the shell game and get back to me. And if you can't, don't get back to me.
That's it. They always want to move to. They want to move to the issues where they think that they can make a point on or win on. But I'm more interested in the issues that no one can win on but me, because those are the issues that really count. And I've got 1,000 pages of them in my book. So, and that's all I need, right? I think 1,000 pages is enough.
And the book is for free. I'll make a link to that as well.
All right. Awesome, Len. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you for being a guest on Black Op Radio.
Black Op Radio is pleased to announce a direct download section. That's right. Now you can purchase all archive shows and specialty packages such as the John Armstrong interview, Doug Horn, Jim Douglas, Jim Diogenio, and more. So instead of having to wait with regular mail, you can get shows you want in minutes directly to your computer. Check out the direct download section at blackopradio.com. Black Op Radio presents Colonel L. Fletcher Prouty, the DVD Complete Collection. Finally, the DVD set you've been waiting for is available. Over 15 hours with Colonel L. Fletcher Prouty. Over 15 hours. Interviews with Len Osanic, John Judge, David Ratcliffe, and more. This is a one-of-a-kind set. These interviews feature Fletcher Prouty having candid conversations regarding his 23 years in the military, but specifically 9 years in the Pentagon from 1955 to 1964. His inside knowledge is invaluable to researchers of this era of American and world history. These are the revelations you've been waiting for. Over 15 hours with Colonel L. Fletcher Prouty, the complete DVD collection. Available at the Colonel Prouty reference site, www.prouty.org, and blackopradio.com. It's a political rally, a free speech zone, a town hall meeting. It's an interrogation at NSA headquarters. Now, it's time to make a statement. Time to represent. Time to let them know who you are. That you're part of the Black Op. With a brand new Black Op Radio t-shirt. Comes in all sizes. Wear it loud and proud. Join the Black Op today. www.blackopradio.com. If you believe there's more to the JFK assassination and the mystery surrounding the CIA and its covert operations, you're not alone. Meet the man Oliver Stone called X in the epic motion picture JFK. Colonel L. Fletcher Prouty comes forward with never-before-seen or heard documentation and information about JFK, the Vietnam War, the CIA, and more on a brand-new CD-ROM. The collected works of Colonel L. Fletcher Prouty is an incredible offer not to be missed. For a limited time only, find the answers surrounding these issues and more with the collected works of Colonel L. Fletcher Prouty. Or visit the Colonel Prouty reference site on the World Wide Web, the collected works of Colonel L. Fletcher Prouty.